Welcome to the iSoftpull Main Course Podcast, where we get straight to the point, the meat and potatoes. Now let's dig in.
So we're talking about partners. It's funny how this came out. You're talking on partners tomorrow.
Yeah, Thursday.
Oh, Thursday's the speech?
Yeah,
Or is it a talk or is it a...
So there's a summit with like a group of companies, and but yeah, my piece specifically is on partnership with one of our big vendors.
So do you have, on that topic, what do you think are generally some key attributes that make a good partnership or make a partner? Yeah. Right?
Yeah, well, I think that like most things, we throw words around like partner, like, oh, that's a partner, but we're really like intentional about, which of our vendors are suppliers and which ones are partners, because we can get data from anywhere or we can get a piece of software from anywhere. But looking at things like, are they there to support you, right? Are we aligned, right? This is a discussion we had just yesterday between our two organizations is, if we're going to make a change, how do we do something that makes both of us feel aligned? That's a partnership way of approaching a problem rather than a vendor saying, here's your price increase, or here's here's the thing that's changed, you deal with it, right? A partner is looking for, how do we work together? How do we create alignment? Because they understand your growth is their growth. And I think it's just a difference in mentality.
Yeah, and so when we're talking about partners here in business, so just as an introduction, Ryan's the COO of Fraud Protection Network Data. You guys got a new brand. Tell us what the new brand is first.
Yeah, so the company name is still Fraud Protection Network, so we still have that incorporated. But we've had our acronym as a DBA FPN for some time, and we've done quite a bit more, with just the acronym. But earlier this year, we sold our direct-to-consumer side, which was really where we started. And on the direct-to-consumer side, Fraud Protection Network made a lot of sense because we were creating this platform that was protecting consumers from things like fraud. So the name was very literal. But as we've transitioned away from the direct-to-consumer, we've grown into what we call our enterprise side of the business, the B2B side of our business. It didn't make sense. Mortgage company was, who is this Fraud Protection Network?
Sure.
And what are they doing? So we decided just to simplify down to our acronym FPN, kind of like VRBO right now. They're no longer vacation homes for whatever it was. Now it's just Verbo.
Okay.
Yeah, so kind of the same thing. And then the data intelligence is just kind of a lockup or a tag to help people understand what it is that we're focused on. And that's really where we're headed, and going back to the partnership discussion, that's where all of our vendor partner discussions are headed as well. So the event part of the reason for coming out to the event, obviously to, help my vendor, hopefully, partner to talk about how they're a good partner, but also to roundtable with them and say, hey, what's next? What's changing? What's coming? How can we do it better? And, it's the same reason why, you and I have sat down for the last day and a half, kind of just looking at the landscape and trying to figure out what we can do better. Data is really powerful, or it can be really powerful, but you have to have the intelligence behind it to interpret, the nuance and figure out what that data means. And that's what we're trying to do. So
sure,
that's the new name.
I like it. So when we're talking about partners, I'm thinking like, I look at all of our vendors / partners, and you look at like AWS. I wouldn't consider them their partner, right? They're just a vendor. That's where we do our hosting. That's where our infrastructure is. We have some integrations with some CRMs that are kind of just vendor, right? Zapier, we have an integration with them. They're a vendor, right? When we talk about our partnerships, it's more intimate. It's more strategic, right? And problems do arise. And so when you're looking at a partner and maybe somebody approaches you, maybe they have a widget or something that they want to integrate your data in, what do you look for in a partner? What do you think are some of the good characteristics of a good partnership?
Yeah, one of the first things is people. And that's really difficult when you get into these very large organizations, because the people don't always stay around, right? With some of our, larger vendors, I mean, we've had a half a dozen, if not more, sales agents or reps or whatever you
Sure.
want to call them, over the course of time. So the individual there is a little bit, I don't want to say less important, because you still want to have a good relationship with people, but you're not doing business with people. You're really doing business with a company. But when you get to smaller companies, especially companies that are innovating or they're on the forefront of something, then you're oftentimes, talking to CEO or whomever, and kind of understanding the person that's behind it and what their vision is and where they're headed is a big part of, I think, where you start to figure out, does this have the opportunity to be a partnership? Because like a marriage or anything else, I mean, some of these are long term and they're contractual in nature. But just like a marriage, yeah, there's a piece of paper, but I view a contract as you never look at that contract when things are going right, only when things are going wrong,
Yeah.
right? And so you don't want to be to the point to where the contract's the thing that matters, right?
Sure.
What matters is the relationship, and because you can have this bulletproof contract, but you can decide to do things, differently or on the up and up together, and you can always amend that contract later. But again, all of that boils back down to people generally. We do business with people we want to do business with. I think that's human nature. I think in the last couple of years, it's been difficult because we've lost a lot of the face-to-face. And you can't replace that, right? And I think that kind of goes back to the vendor partner discussion, right? The non-face-to-face, you're just buying data, you got an invoice every month. Like, yeah, they fill a need, but you're not moving the ball forward. Sitting down, having conversations, hey, what's going on in your business? Is there anything we can do to help? What are you seeing in the marketplace? Here's what we're seeing. That exchange of information and ideas, I think is really important. So for me, it starts off with people, right? And a lot of that is just, are we going to be aligned? And for the larger companies, it's more about the company's position or the company's stance. So since you don't necessarily have the reliability of a set person, where are they headed as a company? We talked about in the mortgage space, a wholesale lender, right? And you've got some wholesale lenders that also are retail lenders. And you have some wholesale lenders that say, you know what, we're just a wholesale lender. And that entity isn't going to be competing with their brokers, right? And to me, that would be, even though it could be a major organization, that's a cultural thing. That's a decision that they've made as a company that if I'm a broker, that would align with me more. That's somebody that tells me they're going to support me because their only path forward is through their brokers.
Sure.
So again, I would look for people at first, and then if it's a larger organization, for the values of the organization, not who they're voting for. I don't care about that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about, culturally, what are they trying to promote? Where are they trying to head? Are they innovating, right? Are they looking for what's new and what's next? Or are they just trying to, gouge you for a few nickels here and there?
Yeah, and some of these partnerships we come across, a lot of it is just they want an integration, or they want the two technologies to work together, right? And so I think that's the first component is, for me at least, does the partnership purpose make sense,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in the long term too, because we're both going to invest time, resources, money to that partnership, right?
Yeah.
But when you get past it, I think you're right. I think it is about assuming. I mean, let's just talk about a CRM. There's lots of CRMs that are out there, right? And there's lots of data providers out there. So, and the data providers and the CRMs, they can work together great. But it's the founders or the leaders of the company that are working together on a day-to-day basis that can work together to come up with new solutions, right? Because maybe the original problem they were trying to solve in the beginning of the partnership changes over time. Once the partner is together and they're going for this goal, then they can solve other problems. So I think not only just tackling the problem and being aligned on the problem, but getting an innovative person on the other side of the table, right? That all right, we're going to develop this together, and who knows where it's going to go.
Yeah. Well, I think that together being, a big component of that, right? Where, when you have just not to necessarily name names, but we do a lot of work with the 3 credit bureaus, right? And I don't think either one of us, at least not in the near future, expects them to invest in by writing a check. I mean, they've done that in the past, not very often, not to us, but I'm just saying in general, right? That sometimes they'll acquire a company, but sometimes they have made an investment. But short of that, they can also invest in your company by agreeing to do work and different things like that, and bringing people, resources, and ideas to the table. And, when you were talking about the integration, I agree with that. And it does need to be viewed as a two-way street. And sometimes when there's a disparity in the size of the company, the larger company will essentially say, sure, we'll integrate. It's going to be $15,000 up front. It's going to be right. And they're not really looking at it as saying, this is a partnership. We're working together. They're saying, if you can get through our obstacles, we'll allow you to do this.
They might have a sheet that says partner list, right? But what are we talking here?
Yeah. And if your position on that list had to do with how much you spent with them and, how much you greased the palms along the way, it's probably not a real partnership. But we have seen even the biggest companies truly take on that role. And I'll just give you one real simple kind of, for instance. So we moving into a new space can be challenging. Sometimes your incremental price is very high compared to your large competitors because they just have this massive buying power. Or there's a huge commitment. Some of our vendors are looking for large commitments. And so we made a rather large commitment, and then given some market conditions and things like that, we were going to fall short of that, of that amount. So that means we would have to basically come up with some money for air, right? Sure. And that's a tough pill to swallow, especially as running a business, owning a business. Like, I mean, it's one thing to have expensive items. It's another thing to pay for literally nothing.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of thinking how we were going to approach this vendor. And before we had an opportunity to approach them, they proactively came back and said, hey, listen, looks like you're going to fall short. We're going to have a really hard time selling our finance team on, that we just are going to make this go away. However, we have this other thing that will give you at this ridiculous rate. You can apply that money towards this, and it'll give you new tools and resources to do things that you hadn't even thought of doing yet. That's pretty impressive. That's an investment, right? I mean, they didn't have to do that. They're going to get that money one way or the other, right? But being able to come at us with a proactive idea, saying, hey, here's a way that this might actually help your business. Buying air doesn't help your business, but buying this might help your business. They're basically saying, we can't ask you to spend, or we can't get our finance team to let you spend less money, but we can actually give you some value for what you're going to be spending. And that was huge. And not only was that huge because they stopped being a vendor and we started seeing them as a partner because of that, but we were able to grow in a new division that we really hadn't even anticipated, all because of a vendor brought an idea to the table. And I think that's the difference, right? One sits back and says,
pay the man.
It's due, and another one says, hey, you know what? This is coming due. Looks like we're not going to be where we wanted to be. What can we do to make this better?
I think that's a good point, and having empathy for stuff is going to go wrong in a partnership, right? And to think that everything is just going to be peachy and we're just going to go down the road and everything is going to be dollar signs. I think that's a little naive going into any partnership, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that everybody's a partner when things are going good.
Sure.
Right? And I think you hit the nail on the head with those difficult times. And sometimes we don't necessarily know we have a partner right out of the gate, right? Like we seek those out, right? We look at the people, we look at the organization, we look at what's next. And that's the intention, right? We go into the relationship with that intention, but it has to be proven out over time.
Yeah.
And I did vendor earlier because we did just see them as a vendor, but then they kind of flipped the script on us in a way that we didn't expect by bringing new ideas to the table. And so even though that partnership, you can go into it with the best of intention, but it has to, happen over time. And it happens from an investment, whether it's time or going to their events or whatever it is on both sides, right?
Yeah.
And I think where you really know whether or not, like, the litmus test is, to your point, when things aren't going as expected.
Yeah, like they say, like, characters defined, in the low times.
Yeah.
Not when everything is going good,
Right,
right?
exactly.
Like who you are, what
Our
you stand.
failures,
Yeah.
our learning experience. That's how we propel ourselves forward. And I think within the partnership, if you're experiencing this difficulty or whatever it is, and you can go to them and have an open conversation, that's more indicative of a partner than being like, oh, we're having this unforeseen issue, and they're not going to help you out, right? So I think it's those moments where stress is placed on the relationship that you might have set out with the intention of having a partner, but that's the proof. And then when you get through those are long term.
Yeah.
Those are the relationships that last. Those are the ones that, you help each other. And, something that's interesting is the discussion, does a partner have to, I mentioned the wholesale concept, and that was a great partner with their brokers because they weren't in competition. But I don't think that that's a necessity of a partnership. I think you can have a partnership with competitors.
Sure.
Right. And I think, but you also have to understand, like, be open about it. When are we competing? When are we not competing? And also, who are we actually competing with? Are we really competing with each other, or are we really competing against this much larger market?
Yeah, this other conglomerate over here.
Exactly.
Because we can sit here and say we're going to compete. Two small fries over here, and we're trying to.
Right.
The too many CRMs going up against Salesforce. It's like, is it really?
Yeah, there's not I think that's just kind of the theory of abundance, right? There's plenty out there,
yeah.
Right? And if we see that we're fighting over this, we might just not be looking in the right places.
Yeah.
And sometimes having discussions with that, hey, did you think about this? Did you think about that? Or I've learned something over the last 6 years that maybe you haven't, and you've learned something that I haven't. And the only way that we can, kind of grow is either through the failure or hopefully learning from other people sharing that information.
You bring up a good point on there on that kind of light competition. And that I kind of want to shift topics into exclusivity, or being like, I really like your position that, like, FPN does what it does, and they just want to be one little wheel in each of these partnerships, so to speak. We don't need to be everything.
Right.
Some vendors or partners want exclusivity agreements, right? And they want to be, I want it all. And I think that I really like your approach, where it's like, I want to provide value and I want to win the partnership and do the best. And I think you'll actually be better and end up having more abundance doing it that way, as opposed to trying to tie somebody down and being like, this is everything.
Yeah. Well, a couple things that come to mind with that. First is winning a relationship based on things like price. It's the same reason you're going to lose the relationship 6 months later, 9 months later, whatever it is. Winning the relationship based on things like creating a partnership, finding, alignment, trying to maybe customize something for them, or honestly, just stopping and not selling them anything and just asking what they need, right? Doing true needs analysis and actually coming up with solutions that work for their company specifically. So going back to that, if you win on price, right, that's all that you are, is price, right?
Yep.
But if you go in and you win on merit and you bring these new and unique ideas to the table, you don't have to worry as much about exclusivity, because if you're really the best at what you do, right, and you continue to work at being the best, you're not at risk for losing those clients, right? So
Yeah.
I think that there's a maybe that's a little bit brazen or borderline. I think it's confident, but maybe it's a little overconfident at times. But if that's what we're striving for, then we don't need to necessarily lock people down with exclusivity, because if you really are the best at what you do, they're not going to want to leave you. And even if they try, they're going to come back because they're going to realize, oh, you know what? Grass wasn't really greener on the other side.
Yeah.
Right. And then the other thing that comes up, that I was trying to think of the 2 points. The other thing being, it's like open or closed APIs. right? Use a CRM that's very open,
Yeah.
right? It allows for tons of integration. And have you done less business with them because you
No,
weren't
I've done
locked
more
in?
actually.
Exactly, right? They created the opportunity, said, take what you want, leave the rest, and they just keep bringing good products to the table, and we've had other experiences, I'm sure you have too, right? Where you end up in this captive, you want this one little thing, you can't get it, it's going to be more expensive, it's going to be more headache. And those relationships, sometimes they last because of contractual obligations, sometimes they last because you just don't have the time or the energy, but you're never going to recommend that to somebody.
Yeah.
It's not a valuable part of your business. It's like I used to do credit card processing when I worked for the bank many years ago, and I would walk in and I'd say, listen, neither one of us wants to be having this discussion, right? Credit cards are very much like a necessary evil. There's a fee associated with it. You would love everybody to come in and pay cash. Now, this was years ago when people still did things like use cash. But let's make this less painful. Let's actually be heads up about this discussion, and let's figure out what makes this actually make sense. And there was just an approach that most people hadn't seen before, where they were just like, oh, this guy's going to sell me credit cards, it's bait and switch. I don't understand the fees, it's all going to go up. And it's like, yeah, well, but it doesn't have to be that way. Let me show you how to actually save money just by doing things like, again, like adding zip codes. These are all things that we didn't know, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Or it wasn't as transparent as it is today. And so anyways, going back to that, winning on merit, right? And being transparent, like opening it up and saying, this is what we can do. And I think that if you give value, right, and you seek alignment and you do business with partners, exclusivity isn't as necessary as some seem to think that it is.
And I think you hit a point there real briefly, is just being transparent.
Yeah.
Right? The worst thing in a relationship is being blindsided by something.
Yeah.
That's the worst. I would rather, like the old saying, the cover up is always worse than the original scandal. You know what I mean? So just being transparent on what your goals and what your initiatives are, and having that freedom after you've gone through these tough times with people to say, hey, this is what we want to do, and this is where we want to go, and we could do it together, right?
Yeah.
But we don't have to do everything together, back to the exclusivity thing. Right? And we can win together, right? So I think that's big. And I had to go ahead.
And I don't think that don't do exclusivity. Like, I'm not saying, right?
Yeah.
There's no extreme, right? Because there are times when you have to protect your company, or there are times when you have to do certain things, or you have a particular intellectual property, that you're
going to license to this one person.
Exactly. And so, we spend way more than I'd care to admit on attorneys and contracts. Those things are very important, right? And we do them. But again, like I said, the contract is, this is what we do in case something goes wrong. And once that's out of the way, then we can have real discussions about how we grow our companies and how we actually, do business together. And that's where you go off in the direction of the partnership. But I think you're 100% right. It's that blindsided concept. And I think that goes back to something I was at least attempting to say earlier, which is, it's really easy to go out and have drinks and high five when things are going well. But if you know something negative is coming, being able to have that openness, that transparency, that honesty with that other side of the equation, say, hey, nobody's going to like this, but let me tell you that this is coming, or here's how we can work. And then they bring, like that one vendor, instead of saying, hey, you have this huge payment coming due, they said, well, what can we do with this money that would be advantageous, right? And it's just a different way of looking at the same problem. And I think that's a big part of being a partner, right? Because if you seek partnerships, then you need to be a good partner too.
And I think being a good partner, sometimes it's, to bring it back, is, how can I serve you? Sometimes, and like, a lot of times we said, like, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. Sometimes guys just need help.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in return.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know how many times I've called you, Ryan, I need help.
Yeah.
And it's not to the core fundamentals of our deal that benefits us both. Ryan, I need help on this that is not going to benefit you primarily.
Yeah.
You know? And I think when you can help the person that you're in a partnership with, even if it's not a direct benefit to you, it's kind of like, it's like a relationship. I mean, it's like a relationship. It is a relationship.
Yeah. We just don't hold hands very often.
Yeah. But I think that entering into these partnerships is key for growth because businesses require all of their technologies to talk together.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And we can achieve a lot more together than in solidarity.
Yeah.
Right.
Agreed. Yeah, and I think something that when we look at the SMB, that small medium marketplace versus the very large organizations, right? Because they have so much size and so many resources, they have all these different departments, and they have these different kind of think tanks within the organization, and their accounting team is kicking up one bit of information, and they have all these different facets to their organization where they're bringing up expertise. And in our smaller companies, we're likely experts in one or two things, but we don't necessarily have experts in all of those things, right? So there's a couple ways to try to fix that. We could just hire everybody under the sun, and then we'd go under in a minute because we couldn't afford the payroll. Or you seek out those resources that you're missing externally. And some of those are going to be paid relationships, outsourcing to maybe a business coach or something like that. But other ones are going to be from mentors and people that we can share ideas with. And I think going back to the transparency thing, if you just share freely, in that moment, there's maybe not benefit, but whether you want to call it karma or good vibes or whatever it is, I think that stuff all comes back full circle. And like I said, looking for good partners, you have to be a good partner. Investing into a relationship isn't always dollars and cents. Sometimes it's time on the phone. So those are some of the things that I don't think you can always clearly define. Or know necessarily at the beginning of a relationship that that's what it's going to be. But if you look for those fundamentals, good corporate vision, good direction, people, hopefully, where you have a good relationship with people, and always seek deals and relationships that are aligned, right? If I do well, you do well, right? Like that type of alignment is always going to be more likely to result in a partnership. If you're ever pitted against each other, it can be difficult, right?
Now, what just kind of shifts quick another topic. There's different size partners, right? Mm-hmm. There's publicly traded companies that can be partners. There's startups. I got an idea, and a lot of idea guys come to us, and I like listening to the ideas, but sometimes realistically, I like the idea. How does your company look at like different companies, irrespective if they're irrespective of how does your company look at potential partnerships when they're small versus when they're big?
Yeah. So that's where the rarely in a relationship is it 50-50 or at least 50-50 all the time. Right? There's going to potentially be an ebb and a flow. A younger, newer company is generally going to take more from that relationship, right? They're going to need more resources, generally time. And unfortunately, time is one of the
most valuable.
That's very finite as well, right? I mean, you only have so many hours in a day. So it is difficult because you do have to make hard decisions sometimes where you can't. But I think what's important there too is just the transparency thing. To tell somebody that you don't have the ability to support them in the way that they need to be supported is better than not returning an email or, stringing them along.
I think that's how we started in the beginning, actually.
I told you to go somewhere else.
You told me to go somewhere else. I was like, you're like, to be honest, Dan, I don't have the bandwidth.
Yeah.
And that's respectable.
Yeah.
I can respect that.
Yeah.
I'd rather hear that than just no.
Right.
With no.
But that's the perfect example too, because answering somebody's question, giving them your time, whatever it is, being transparent, being honest, seeing your role as a good partner, 2-3 years later, the whole thing came full circle.
Yeah.
And there was no animosity. There was no issue. You didn't feel slighted. You knew that I was doing the best thing I could for you in that time, in that moment. So when the times changed and our paths crossed again, then we had a new opportunity and we ended up doing business together. So many of the times, I always like to joke that, I get more business by telling people no than telling people yes.
Yeah.
Right. But it's because it's refreshing, I think. So many people are, oh yeah. And then you get the product and you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
It's not half of what I thought that it was, and if you're, it's kind of that under promise, over deliver, right? Yeah, we can do that. And then they open it like, wow, I got even more than I expected. And that, I think, leaves a good taste in their mouth. It's just doing the right thing, right? But yeah, so I think that when you're weighing those partners, it's a lot less about size and a lot more about, like you mentioned, bandwidth. Like, can I be the partner that's going to be necessary for this relationship to be successful? Then you have to ask if they can too, right? But you have to ask, can I? And sometimes I can't. I don't have the time. I don't have something. You know what I mean? And just being honest about that, I think, is helpful.
Sometimes the timing is just not right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like this month, if any partner came to me this month and was like, let's start this initiative.
Right.
I can't do anything until January. Right. I love the idea. I love you as a person. I think we could have a great partnership. But right now is not the time.
Yeah. And you know what? We've been talking about all the positives, of partnerships and finding good partners. Just like relationships, when they take that turn, or they, in a relationship, maybe you'd use a word like toxic or whatever.
Sure.
You also need to know when it's no longer a partnership.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to make different decisions. And sometimes those are difficult, but they're necessary. And so, we always come from a place of trying to do the right thing, putting our best foot forward, trying to, win based on merit, being transparent, right? Giving to the relationship, but if it can't be one way, so you have to make sure that you really are working with partners. And sometimes that means saying no, in the beginning or at some point that it's taken a turn. But more often than not, you get to grow together, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, I think that was a good show, guys. Any last comments we want to plug? No, we're good?
No plugs. I appreciate, doing these. We post them on our social media too. So kind of cross promote and,
there you go.
Let people know that we're out here. We're not competing with each other. We're going after the 800-pound gorillas that are some of our competitors. And being transparent, giving as much as you expect to get. With those things, I think that you're going to find that you have more partners than you have vendors.
I think that's a good message. Cheers, guys.
Thanks for listening. Subscribe to the main course for straight to the point business insights.